Hey, brothers and sisters, what's up? This is the Reluctant Nabi back again. Okay, um, this is the piggyback off of the one I showed you with the X and Y chromosome. All right, and I'm gonna just go straight in and let you know, brothers, the black woman wants ownership or elimination of the Afro man, not relationship. Be careful that you do not confuse relationship and ownership. They want to own you. If you haven't seen anything, seen what I mean in the last video, something's wrong. All right. Now, how do you know this? You got these two memes. Every black woman is a queen. The black woman is God. How did that come into here? Where did they get these notions from? They got these from the sellout Hotep men. In other words, men who sold out other men to put this false narrative by. Why? Because they knew that the black women would run down to the nearest store and buy up every little trinket and other kind of stuff that you have there. Period. This is what this is all about. All right. Why do I have Jaswood and I have started in New Orleans, had Napoleon, if Napoleon didn't get his behind kicked in Haiti? What does that have to do with everything? That's an epiphany moment for me. So let me greet everybody real quick. Havorten hardu gudag. Ola oi to the bang versus los. Bonjour Miss Me, Kedu Bawani Konnichiwa. Ni hao ni ama. Sani bonani. Jambo habaragani. Assalamu alaikum and shalom. Okay? Now, this Napoleon getting his butt kicked seems a far stretch to some people. Like, he talking about Napoleon? What? Napoleon? What's that got to do with anything? All right? But I want y'all to pay attention, because Napoleon getting his butt kicked in Haiti has a lot to do with me showing you what the real deal is with the black woman. All right? This God's second self. This was something by Louis Farrakhan. You know, Nation of Islam. All right? So you got the Muslims, the Hoteps. Why do they keep putting this stuff out? It sells. If you want to make a lot of money, the best way to do it is sell out the men. I showed you before that these women are trying to exterminate the men, one out of jealousy. Now, why would I bring in Napoleon? All right. This is going to be an illustration to show you how that everybody has been benefiting off of the creativity of the Afro man, not the mulatto, not anyone else. And the best example of this is New Orleans jazz. Well, again, Napoleon. The brother mentioned Napoleon. Well, let me break it down for you. All right, let me break it right down for you. Napoleon's army was defeated in Haiti. All right, let's look at the fallout from that. All right, let's look at Creoles, right? Creoles are people, the women that slept with either the Spanish or the French and created what everybody calls mixed. But I'm going to show you something. The Spanish and the French did not consider them mixed, even though they called them Creoles. This is how we know this. Mistresses were allowed in French society and were kept in New Orleans in the second household. They often were mixed blood European and African and were called Creoles of color. They were higher in the social hierarchy than the darker blacks. Understand this, Afro people. And understand this. At the time, they understood the so-called blacks to be indigenous to this land. All right, so when the French and the Spanish, when everybody but the English had babies with the black woman, they considered the black woman their wife and or mistress property, and they considered the children from that offspring their children. Okay, they lived and worked in the area today known as the French Quarter, which was predominantly white. So the Creoles, meaning the mistresses and the offspring from the mistresses, before Napoleon got his butt kicked, understand this, lived in the French quarters with white people. Now, because they were Creole, they weren't all the way up there on the hierarchy chain like with the quote unquote pure white non-Afro blood mix. But because the father was white, they were seen in that society as having more rights and privileges than the black people, or as we know us now, the indigenous, aboriginal, as they know them to be back then. All right. The children were raised in a French culture and traditions, even sent to France for their education. This is where jazz comes into this. Music was encouraged on an amateur basis only. Students striving to be professional musicians studied classical music only, not the music of New Orleans playing in Storyfield, red light district. The tradition thus established giving Creoles a place in the hierarchy of society. Okay, the tradition thus established giving Creoles a place in the hierarchy of society was highly unusual anywhere else in the U.S. Why? Because the U.S. is mainly under English doctrine. All right, so we accept the English doctrine, not the Portuguese, Spanish, or French doctrine of how they dealt with people. And in all these doctrines, the black man was the lowest on the totem pole. In all these doctrines, none of the Caucasians had a problem with sleeping with the so-called black woman. And the black man was not allowed to produce a child with a Caucasian woman. If that happened, that child was put to death, probably along with that black man. Understand this. Not the case in dealing with the black woman. All right. This is how, when you get into 68% of slave owners that were black people were black women. So the black people that owned slaves, 68% of them were black women. The rest of them were men that had white fathers. Understand this. So when you go look at all these black, so-called black men, no, they weren't black. They had white fathers. See, white people want to throw that up in your face all the time. No, they had white fathers. All right. Now, African owned slaves. If a guy came over here as an African, so understand this. Slaves did not own other slaves unless their daddy was white. Okay? Now, everywhere else, they would consider to be black and had no legal rights. They had legal rights and privilege, the Creoles did, in French territories. All right? Now, before I break this down, the jazz and where I'm going with all of this. And then Torrance Johnson, I have his statement sort of at the end of this, right? But let me tell you where I'm going with this, right? The creation of jazz was from the Negro people, right? After collaboration to teach the Creole people who had formal training how to improvise. The Creole people, using their skin, were able to organize bands and things because of their color. All right. Let's look at how the Creole people, let's say, got knocked off on their high horse. So this has basically happened. The French was kicking everybody's butt in Europe, right? Except for Russia. They go into Russia, they lost because of buttons. Well, during this time when they start losing, they were bleeding money. Part of the reason they were bleeding money was Haiti. The Haitians decided to get rid of the Christian religion, right? They banded together and started warring against the French. And they kicked the French out of Haiti. All right. Napoleon lost so much money that he had to sell the Louisiana Purchase. As you know, Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, and they sold the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. All right, to Jefferson. It was the deal of the century for the United States. So what happens when they sell the Louisiana Purchase? All of the thing that was going under the French doctrine now reverts to the English doctrine, which means that if you were Creole, your daddy is no longer what you're considered to be. You are now plagued by the one drop rule of the English, who was the only people in the world that was practicing that doctrine that you are black simply because of the one drop rule. Period. All right. Because the English, in their puritanical ways, were the most restrictive on slaves and was just the most out there on the purity of whiteness. That even one drop was enough to make you considered to be black. I was watching a movie called Riverboat, and a white guy that was married to a black woman in the movie, right? It's one of Gershwin's things, musical. And one of the black people, white guys, was married to a black woman that was a Creole, and what he did was he cut her, he sucked out her blood and swallowed it, and he says, "I have one drop of her blood in me, so now we're together. So if she goes, I have to go." Kind of like that. All right. So how do we get into jazz, and why does this matter in what I'm about to break down about the betrayal of the black woman? All right. Well, I wanted to show you this to show you how the created everybody is living off of the creativity of the Afro man, and specifically the Afro man, because the mulattoes are getting privileged and they're kind of being trained by the Caucasian people, right? And so a lot of this becomes so y'all know I went back to school, and in my music class I started to understand something of I understood something more about the black musical heritage that started every other popular form of music. That the difference between us then and it has always been our thing that we was community based, even though we may have a leader call and response. Our everything we did was community based, right? With strong males in lead, but everything was community based. The women had a part, the men had a part, men had the men's part, women had the women part, but we came together as each having our individual parts, then we put them and mushed them together and turned out to have something great. All right, that's kind of what happened with jazz. All right, that the Creoles, because of what happened in 1803, by 1877, they lost all their businesses and were forced to interact more closely with the quote unquote black people in the black neighborhoods, because now they were considered by the United States as black because of the one drop rule. All right, and so as the social position started to decline, um, let me give you just a quick synopsis on what else happened. So now, that's why I said because Napoleon got his butt kicked, it caused him to sell the French territories, which included Louisiana, and all throughout the middle of the United States. All right, so not just Louisiana. And so in doing this, it changed the dynamics of how the Creoles saw themselves. It forced them now with French classical training in music. All right, so they had classical training. It forced them to now interact with the black people who had no training at all, but improvise and play the way they felt. And when the mulatto, let's say blacks, started interacting with the Afro males. The Afro males started teaching them how to improvise and everything. Now, this is how this plays a part in it. Now, you saw the thing with the bands, right? The problem in New Orleans is they sit, as we know by the floods, they sit below sea level, which means you can't bury nobody in the ground. All right. So you needed to make 3 contracts to 3 guilds. All right. The funeral, the pharmacy, and the brass. Those were your 3 contracts: the funeral, the pharmacy, and the brass. All right. The funeral parlors, they're the ones that made the cement thing, and those cost money. So you kind of had to save up, and it's like insurance. These were your 3 insurances. All right. And so the pharmacy is, all right, y'all understand that, right? And then the next is the brass, right? The brass band. Why? Because during the funeral and for other occasions, they're the ones that play for everything, and they cost a lot of money. So if you had this insurance, like car insurance, you could use it when you need it. All right. Now, we got first line and second line. Let me explain first line and second line to you. All right. The first line would be the musicians. The second line would be the people following. All right. And so basically, the Creoles learned from the black musician how to play hot rhythm, add timbral manipulation, change the tone and color of their music, and to improvise. All right. What the Creoles did is they brought the European repertoire of dances like the polka, mazurka, waltz, the quadrille. Okay, now the quadrille was being made fun of up north in the minstrel shows. All right, and so um, what happened is that the blacks, the Afro men, right, were able to play the European music and add finesse to it. All right. Now, ragtime and blues were absorbed into the collaboration, and that's what's called jazz. It was spelled with two S's, but we don't. No one knows how it got the two Z's, right? And so you got Kid Ory. That is the trombone player who first started up these bands, who was a mulatto. All right. And so he's the one that went and got everybody together. But when he joined with Buddy Bolden, who was kind of like people said the loudest trumpet player, that's when things started taking off for jazz itself. All right. The original Dixieland Jazz Band was a white band that was the first to record. All right. They were first um, well, they had the most successful one because what they did was they took the jazz that the Afro men and Creole men was playing, stole it, made a record, and then well, they became more popular because they're white. They recorded the first jazz record in 1917. All right. So what does this have to do with anything? All right. It gets us to here that, as I showed you, that black women understood this. They've been taught this throughout our history, and because they don't teach their children the true history, they teach the history that is going to favor them while dishonoring the man. All right, if they teach it at all, right? That's why the black woman is so dependent on the public schools to teach their children. Because for them to stay home and learn from the men, learn from the elders and stuff like that. This is why I keep saying this is why it's important for the true sisters to separate from the black women. This is why it is very vitally important for the true sisters to separate from the black woman. All right. So Torrance Johnson says this, a very good point you made in your opening statement, Brother Nabi. Come to think of it, the BAW, 304 Jezebel witches do in fact act like they are institutionalized, hardworking puppets for the ghost man. I'm gonna just shorten. You can read the whole thing. The ghost man knows that the Afro man has been going up against their oppressive system for a lifetime to give them trouble. All right, with their own enigmas against us with the Most High's help. With their own enigmas against us, with the Most High's help, but the ghost man, demonic black snakes, the BAW, doesn't even know that they're programmed to act out for them on cue without even know what they're being told to do. And this is where I disagree with him. They know exactly what they're doing. All right, this is about domination. These women of the modern day want to eliminate themselves by eliminating the men because they have been so brainwashed in vanity from the false teachings of men that they choose to follow that they don't see that they're going to be the cause of their own destruction. All right. All right. So this is what I'm saying. So, Brother Nabi, I think you are saying that the black woman must maintain themselves within their people to pass down some of their family DNA traits to the offspring as an unbroken line of lineage. That's true. But by separating oneself from their people, meaning a black female to more extreme different race of people, she will completely shut off any lineage from her people to pass down to that offspring. That is true. Because remember, the man, no matter who the woman gets with, is the head over that woman. The man that she chooses rules over that woman. He teaches his culture, his everything. All right. And even down to the genes, right? Now, the black woman start passing only the female, the mDNA or the X chromosome down, but she has no Y to pass. So she only has half, right? And if she gets with a Caucasian, Hispanic, whatever, Hispanic is still Caucasian. Spain is still Europe. So if she gets with a European, all right, then that's the lineage that takes root because of the Y chromosome that the man gives. All right. And his culture. So he teaches his culture. That means his sons and his daughters are going to primarily, especially his daughters, be what their father is. Is because the black woman will honor that man while being against the Afro man. And out on, she'll tell her daughters that they need to get another Caucasian man to keep the system going to oppress others. Right? And so this is why the women, it don't matter what women we choose, because we have that same power in our loins. All right, the woman has no power. She has no life. Remember, the woman every 28 days kills any possibility of life in her every 28 days. All this mess that she's the mother of life, she's the giver of life. No, she takes life. Until a man put life in her, she takes life. And even when a man puts life in her, given the 22 million to 50 million abortions of taking the lives of children from 73 to the current year, that's 22 to 50 million. All right, she takes life. She don't give. All right, he goes on to say, if this is what I say, I think you are saying, then black woman has become the greatest fools with a reprobate mindset, not to know what they're doing to themselves and people. That man in the glasses said, okay, we're talking about the guy about the extinction. He says that the indigenous Afro man is becoming extinct in the United States. All right, there's three reasons for that. One, he points out solely because of the abortion. All right, solely because of abortion. Period. All right, but I name another reason. The other reason is we weren't as smart as the Caucasian man to spread our seed to whatever woman we can. So our seed is dying out in us. And remember, I told you that the black woman don't want us, and she want us to die without spreading our seed. Period. And I'm saying we should be too smart for that. We should spread our seed like the Caucasian man is spreading his seed. He goes on to say, the word treason is not a fitting word for the abominable actions of the BAW. I get the feeling the BAW must be quarantined on a level of separation. So it's true, the black American woman don't want a relationship, they want ownership. This is where the title comes from, of the Afro man, which means a slave to do their every bidding. That's what we're saying. We're saying, given our creativity and everything, everybody has used it, propped it up, and we keep being creative. All right. I showed you that the French understood that it's their seed that matters, and they took care of their seed by sending the seed to school. All right. The English were the only warped ones. Period. Hey, y'all know what time it is. So everything will be in the description box that you need. Just take care of yourself and family first. All right? And let them simps and the black woman hit that wall because they're due for it.